Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is January 11th, 2025, and let's get to the news updates happening in Ukraine and Russia, shall we? So, I want to cover first an historic news update today, and the Ukrainian military managed to capture North Korean soldiers alive for the very first time. A few weeks ago, Ukraine did capture one North Korean soldier, but he had critical wounds and did not survive. And so unfortunately, Ukraine wasn't able to interrogate that North Korean soldier, but this time they've managed to capture these two North Korean soldiers alive, and they've already been interrogated. So it's pretty much the final proof we needed to confirm that North Korea is indeed directly involved in the war against Ukraine. What is interesting here, and one of the reasons why it was actually very difficult for the Ukrainians to capture North Korean soldiers, is that Russia and North Korean soldiers are doing everything possible to prevent evidence of North Korea's participation in war by finishing off wounded North Korean soldiers. When they're critically wounded, there's no hope for evacuation, so they just finish them off. So they want to really hide the evidence here. As a matter of fact, you can see that they've been issued Russian passports mentioning that they're actually from Tuva Oblast. Well, the only proof you need is the fact that they don't speak Russian, they only speak Korean. They've already been interrogating by Ukrainians that speak Korean, I believe, or perhaps South Koreans. I'm not really sure about that. But what is important here is that's yet another embarrassment for North Korea and Russia. And it's also a sign to the West, to Europe specifically, that they need to be directly involved in helping Ukraine here. Because you're seeing that Ukraine, of course, I've talked about it, there is a fatigue within Ukraine. Manpower is now limited on the Ukrainian side. And after 3 years of this war, you're seeing that Russia, of course, has allies that are willing and committed to providing Russia with soldiers. This also displays how critical for Russia the situation is. If they're turning to Kim Jong-un for troops, you know that Russia would not be doing this if they had enough sufficient troops to fight in Ukraine. So this indicates as well that it's a critical moment for Russia, that they're relying more and more on North Korea for manpower, for artillery, shells, ammunition, etc. So this situation is critical for Russia, but they can turn to North Korea, perhaps in the future in China, towards China for manpower and other vehicles and artillery and ammunition that they might need. Ukraine right now, it's very uncertain, especially with manpower. The West is still very unwilling to commit troops to help Ukraine to secure a certain front line. And so to me, this is an indication that the West needs to be far more involved than it is right now. And the question of having European troops, boots on the ground in Ukraine, it needs to be serious at this stage, because without it, Ukraine is simply not going to be able to hold another influx of foreign soldiers on its own territory. Just look, 12,000 North Korean troops are well motivated, I shouldn't say well trained, but they're well motivated. According to the Ukrainian soldiers and the interrogators, it seems like they really do have a belief that they're doing, kind of a holy job for Kim Jong-un. They're completely brainwashed, and they're very physically fit as well. So it's much more harder to actually stop these North Korean troops. So this is the reality on the situation in Kursk, and I hope that the West is going to wake up and start considering perhaps the involvement of its own NATO troops in Ukraine to secure a front line that is not active whatsoever. The northern part of Ukraine with Belarus, that would be great if Ukraine wouldn't have to worry about securing and manning that front line with Belarus with its own troops, and instead could move some of these troops to the eastern sector where it's the hottest right now. That could save up a lot of Ukrainian lives. But again, we'll see what happens within the next few months. Now, let's talk about the other big news is massive sweeping sanctions against the Russian oil sector, specifically targeting the Russian shadow fleet, which involves over 200 oil tankers that are illegally exporting Russian oil in different markets. So yesterday, the United States took measures, and the UK, to target this shadow fleet and impose massive sanctions over 180 oil tankers. They also put measures to target two of Russia's major oil producers, Gazpromneft and Surgutneftgaz, along with dozens of their subsidiaries. Combined, these companies reportedly produce over 1 million barrels of oil daily, generating an estimated $23 billion of revenue annually. So, big hit on Putin's shadow fleet. And this fleet also poses a massive environmental threat and a terrorist threat to the world. Let's not forget that last month, 4 of these oil tankers that belonged to Russia sunk in the Black Sea, and that created a massive environmental disaster in the Caucasus, in Crimea, with the oil spill just damaging the entire shores and beaches of the Crimean Peninsula and the Caucasus in Russia. So this is a huge environmental disaster as well, to allow these oil tankers to they're poorly maintained, to freely do what they want over the sea. And also the terrorist threat, because they also serve a double purpose, not only exporting dirty Russian oil, but also damaging underwater sea cables, like we've seen the Baltic Sea recently with several of these Russian ships dragging their anchors at the bottom of the sea to damage underwater sea cables that create internet connectivity, or there's a power transmission through these sea cables. Russia's been using this shadow fleet to damage underwater sea cables, which is also a terrorist sabotage threat to the West. So this is good news, and this is going to be a big hit if all things are maintained throughout this year. Over $23 billion will be lost in revenue for the Putin regime. So that's really significant. That will undermine the funding of his campaign, his military adventure in Ukraine. And last but not least, let's talk about Trump. And I want to give you guys some comments about, his annexation statements earlier this week, but also the fact that, Ukraine is putting a lot of faith in the Trump administration to find a good resolution to the end of this war. And one thing I want to mention here is the fact that the Trump administration earlier this week canceled their visit to Ukraine last minute is actually good news in my opinion. And as they say in Ukrainian, it's not zrada, it's not a traitor move. I think that the Trump administration recognizes that the resolution is far more complicated, and they won't try to attempt to shove easy solutions to Ukraine like it was done in the past since 2014. They won't waste time, and that's good news for Ukraine. Just sit together and talk about it, and Ukraine, maybe should just agree to ceasefire. That was tried, and that failed. And Zelensky talked about it with his interview with Lex Friedman, who pushed these kind of narratives of just sit and talk with Russia. That's already been tried. It didn't work. So I think that there is a recognition within Trump's administration by Keith Kellogg, who's a special envoy to Ukraine to resolve this war, or help resolve this war, that it's a waste of time to try to shove these easy solutions to Ukraine. And that, there's been an admission on Trump's side that it might take 3 to 6 months to start to find a resolution to the end of this war. And also Donald Trump voiced, comments about a possible meeting with Vladimir Putin, which inevitably will happen. I have no doubt that these discussions have already occurred between the Trump administration, or on the way of being at least. The preliminary meetings are being discussed of how that's going to end up being organized between Trump and Putin. But it's just really important that Ukraine pushes as hard as possible right now to get their side heard by the Trump administration. I think that we're seeing the first signs that this is working, and that, Keith Kellogg, by canceling his visit to Kyiv last minute, is an admission that actually, we can't figure this out in a matter of 24 hours or in a week. It's going to take a lot of time. Now, some last comments I want to make about Trump's annexation comments of Canada, Greenland, Panama, etc. Because I did voice my opinion. I still believe and stand that Trump is an imbecile, but Trump is not a politician. And we need to see it from a perspective of he's a businessman. He's never been a politician. And so I think here there's a much bigger play for Trump. And I believe that his comments about, Canada becoming the 51st state, let's just buy Greenland, we'll take over the Panama Canal, we'll rename the Gulf of Mexico Gulf of America. It's a calculated move with a strong message by Trump. And I think that the message by Trump is, I'm not interested in playing by the rules. Biden, let's face it, has been playing by the rules. Biden is behaving himself like a statesman, like a gentleman, like a true politician. But that is also weakness because it's predictable. Biden is predictable, right? It was predictable to hear him say absolutely no way Ukraine will receive permission to use ATACMS against Russian, to use ATACMS on Russian territory. And for months, that, if not years, that question was constantly being asked, and Biden and his administration kept on repeating and answering the same way. So that's the weakness of the West. Unfortunately, there's a strength and a weakness behind this predictability, but that means that for dictatorships like Vladimir Putin, dictators like Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping or Kim Jong-un, they see that the other side is very predictable, and Trump is voicing a message that I'm unpredictable, and that if I want to, I'll pressure Greenland or Denmark to sell Greenland to the United States. I'll pressure the Canadian government to become the 51st state, although we know that this is completely unrealistic. It's not going to happen. And he kind of just voices his opinion of, I don't care, right, about the rules. It allows Trump to be have a much more maneuverability in the geopolitical space, much more maneuverability of actions. Is that, I can do whatever I want because I'm the leader of the most powerful country in the world. And it's unfortunate because the downside to that is that right now he's displaying that by hurting and sacrificing the relations with US partners like Canada, like European Union, Mexico, Panama, countries that are very much willing to work with the United States to resolve conflicts or arguments, whatever it may be. So he's displaying that by hurting the relations with historic US allies. But that's why I think, why Trump made these comments earlier this week is that he really wants to display this image of unpredictability. And, I think in his head, it's like if dictatorships think that they don't have to play by the rules, while the world has to play 4D chess, against China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, etc. I won't be playing that game, and all bets are off. And you'll be guessing what I'll be doing, right? And that's kind of the message that Trump is trying to voice here. So the reality on the ground in the world is that, there's no way Canada is going to become the 51st state of the United States. If anything, that would be the Republicans hurting their chances to ever be reelected as a party, because Canada is a country that is, even if, let's say, the Conservative Party would be elected during the next elections in Canada, it is far more aligned with democratic values than Republican values on so many questions, right? So Canada become the 51st state will pretty much destroy the chances for the Republicans to ever be reelected. So it's never going to happen. And I do believe that our differences will be resolved. But right now, Trump is playing that game because he wants to display himself as this unpredictable world leader that's not going to play by the rules. And I think that his second term is going to be a far more chaotic term, and it's going to be all hell let loose type of governance by the Trump administration, unfortunately. So it's not going to be the first or the last time that Trump is going to be making comments like that. So we need to be prepared. But I'm seeing some positive signs behind that as well, because it keeps leaders like Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin on their toes, because they don't really know what to expect. And Trump is voicing this kind of message of guess, just guess. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. So let me know in the comment section what you guys think about my opinion here about Trump's annexation comments, about do you think it's a calculated move by Trump? Do you think that there's something else behind it? Do you think it's just Trump governing through his tweets, waking up in the morning and thinking that this is a good idea? Let me know in the comments. And I can't wait to hear back from you guys. Thank you for your support for this channel. I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini.